Great minds of humanity, celebrating human brilliance.
Before dawn on the plain of Gaugamela, a young king stared into the darkness at thousands of Persian campfires, knowing that by sunrise he would either vanish into history or shatter the greatest empire on earth. When the charge finally came, he did not hide behind ranks of men but drove straight toward the enemy center, gambling his life on speed, nerve, and a belief that destiny favored the bold. That rider was Alexander of Macedon, only 25 years old, already undefeated, already feared, and still hungry for a horizon no conqueror before him had reached. To understand how one man could redraw the map from Greece to India, we have to begin in a hard northern kingdom that the polished cities of southern Greece once dismissed as rough and half-civilized. There, King Philip II forged Macedon into a military machine of sarissa pikes, disciplined cavalry, and relentless ambition, while his son learned early that power belonged to whoever could move faster than rivals and think beyond tradition. When Philip was assassinated in 336 BCE, the throne passed to Alexander at just 20, surrounded by suspicious nobles, rebellious Greek cities, and foreign enemies who assumed the boy king would quickly collapse. Instead, he saw not a throne to inherit but a mission to complete, measuring himself against heroes like Achilles and against an empire in Persia so vast that conquering it seemed almost absurd. Alexander was born in Pella in 356 BCE into a family where politics, warfare, and myth were inseparable, and stories of omens around his birth fed the belief that his life would be anything but ordinary. His father Philip taught him that kingdoms were won through strategy and steel, while his mother Olympias filled his imagination with divine ancestry, fierce pride, and the unsettling idea that he had been marked out for greatness. As a boy of about 12, he noticed that the horse Bucephalus feared its own shadow, turned the animal toward the sun, and mounted it before a stunned court that suddenly saw more than princely confidence. By 16, acting as regent while Philip campaigned, Alexander was already commanding troops and founding settlements, learning that royal authority was not a ceremony but a test repeated whenever uncertainty appeared. At Chaeronea, still only 18, he led the companion cavalry in the battle that crushed the independence of the Greek city-states, proving on the field that he could turn training, intellect, and reckless courage into victory. Yet Alexander was not shaped by war alone, because at Mieza he studied under Aristotle, who opened before him worlds of ethics, politics, medicine, poetry, zoology, and geography. Those lessons trained him to ask how rivers flowed, how peoples lived, and how ideas traveled, giving the future conqueror a curiosity that would later push him to explore as fiercely as he fought. Above all, he absorbed the Iliad as a manual of glory, keeping Achilles close in his imagination and learning to see reputation as something earned through action so spectacular that generations would remember it. From that education came a dangerous fusion, a commander who could discuss Homer and healing herbs in one moment, then decide in the next that the known world was too small for an ordinary king. The first proof came immediately after Philip's murder, when Alexander moved with shocking speed to eliminate rivals, secure Macedon, and make it clear that youth had not weakened the crown. When Thebes rebelled, he marched south so quickly that disbelief turned to terror, and the destruction of the city became a brutal lesson to Greece that resistance would carry an unforgettable price. Crossing the Hellespont into Asia in 334 BCE, he cast a spear into the soil, visited the legendary site of Troy, and staged his invasion as both military campaign and heroic reenactment. At the river Granicus, he hurled himself into the fighting where Persian cavalry expected an easy kill, and that first major victory opened the gates of Asia Minor to a king who seemed impossible to stop. Then at Issus, against Darius III himself, Alexander struck the Persian center with precision, forced the great king to flee, and transformed a reckless invasion into a direct contest for the mastery of Asia. The siege of Tyre revealed another side of Alexander, because when the island city refused him entry, he answered not with impatience but with engineering, building a causeway through the sea and taking the fortress after months of bloodshed. In Egypt he was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule, and on the Mediterranean coast he marked out Alexandria, a city planned not merely as a trophy but as a hinge between continents. Farther west, at the Oracle of Tyre, he sought something deeper than political legitimacy, and whether the priests truly named him divine or simply echoed his hopes, he emerged with a larger sense of his own destiny. At Gaugamela in 331 BCE, facing a Persian force that dwarfed his own, Alexander exploited space, timing, and nerve so brilliantly that Darius broke again and the Achaemenid Empire effectively ceased to exist. Entering the palaces of Babylon and Persepolis, he crossed an invisible line from conqueror to emperor, adopting pieces of Persian ceremony even as he wrestled with the temptation, glory, and danger of absolute power. When Darius was found dying after betrayal by his own men, Alexander covered the defeated king with his cloak, claiming revenge and succession at once as he took possession of a broken but still enormous empire. The campaigns in Bactria and Sogdiana were harsher than his great set-piece battles, forcing him into mountain warfare, sieges, and paranoia, and there he married Roxana while learning how difficult it was to rule lands he could not simply outrun. Across the territories he founded or refounded cities that bore his name, planting garrisons, markets, theatres, and Greek language into distant landscapes that would carry Hellenistic influence long after his army moved on. In India, at the Hydaspes River, he faced King Porus, monsoon rain, and war elephants, then won one of his hardest battles and honored the defeated ruler because courage recognized courage. But at the Hyphasis River, after years of marching and dying, his veterans finally refused to go farther, and for the first time the man who had defeated empires had to confront the limits of command. The return west through the Gedrosian desert became a march of thirst, heat, and loss that exposed the human cost of ambition more starkly than any triumphal entry ever could. At Susa he staged mass weddings between Macedonian officers and Persian noble women, trying to fuse elites into a single ruling order even as many of his own followers resented how far he had moved beyond old loyalties. In Babylon, still planning Arabian expeditions and new imperial projects, Alexander fell ill in 323 BCE and died at just 32, leaving behind no clear adult heir and no finished design for succession. His generals divided the empire, but they could not contain the aftershock, because Greek language, urban institutions, artistic forms, trade routes, and scientific exchange spread across the Near East in a distinctly Alexandrian world. Alexander's life remains so compelling because it joins brilliance to brutality, vision to vanity, and genuine curiosity to a capacity for destruction that never stopped haunting the lands he crossed. He teaches that speed, imagination, and personal courage can change history, but he also warns that when ambition outruns restraint, even victory begins to consume the victor. From Pella to Alexandria, from Homeric legend to modern strategy, his story endures as proof that one human being can enlarge the possible and still be broken by the scale of his own dream. If Alexander's rise and fall made you see history differently, like the video, share your favorite moment in the comments, and subscribe to Great Minds of Humanity for more cinematic journeys through the lives that shaped our world.